I don't make mistakes. I'm not just like the rest of you. I'm stronger. I'm smarter. I'm better. I am better. I'm not some weak-kneed fucking crybaby that goes around fucking apologizing all the time. And why the fuck would you want me to be?
Yo. Yeah, I'm behind. Like, very. But it's because I was trying to get everything in order with myself. Cut hair, looking good. Floors vacuum, bathroom clean. Ooh, beard look. Hold on. Feeling myself a little bit. But yeah. I guess I'm just ready to play some games. It's not going to be for long. It's just to get it out. I ain't promote shit. Let me do that now. This is the wackest intro I've ever done. I'm so sorry. That's what happens when you're actually behind. Whew. Okay. What up, Batman? Do I have any progress in Shadow Lords? I kind of do. Clearly, I was playing it. What up, Ox? I don't want to work today. I don't blame you. What up, Nami? How you feeling? I am so behind today. I am so behind today, guys. I was like, I need to stream today. So this stream's probably going to be mad short. Because I was cleaning. I even cleaned up myself. You know, like this is looking all good. I'm feeling good. Just... Yeah, you know, I was sitting there like, showing up as half the battle. And not you about to call and cuss me out, though. A better haircut in like the one you gave me. Hey, Nami, how you doing, sweetie? How you doing, gorgeous? I hope that's a better hay. Not you talking like me. Hey, you know, yeah. You pre-ordered Diablo 4 and Street Fighter 6. Street Fighter is going to be so fun. I can't wait. But Nami, I hope you're doing well. Ox, I hope you're doing well. Edmund, I hope you're doing well. I hope you all are doing fantastic, you know. Love all of you. You know a game I will not pre-order? WWE. What's messed up is I want WWE, but I'm not gonna do it either. That's right. The goddamn 23. I don't even blame you. Oh, God. Do I have to use? Tried to play Feel the Bang. Too many errors. I couldn't. I was trying to do something last night. I don't remember what I was doing. What up, Jesus? How you feeling, man? Whew. Man, I'm not tired, you know. I was just like, I'm just behind. And I think that's throwing me off. Because normally, it's what? It's 2 p.m. Normally, I start a stream at like 12. I used to be a fan of song until they went cash and crime. Oh, I forgot how to play Kimura. Whew. Also, you know, what's crazy is I forgot it was fight night until this morning, and I was like, oh shit. And on top of that, oh my god. You know, I actually don't know what her ultra is. I'm just gonna find it. I've had a feeling. Whew, then we're doing the FGC with Street Fighter and Tekken. Well, fantastic, you know. Once you start playing fighting games, you'll enjoy them. And I mean, if you want to play competitive, Street Fighter's got a $2 million, $1 million, however $1 million prize pool this year. It's a lot, and it's online on top of just offline. You going back to sleep? How long are you gonna sleep for? Or how long are you gonna want to try to sleep for? I should say. I don't know, Ox. You know me. Wait, what? Wait, you're never gonna go back to sleep, but you never. I'm confused. I'm definitely confused. No, man, my it's not even my OBS. I think my capture card is acting freaky again, which is not something I want to hear. Because my capture card starts freaking out. That's a really bad sign for me. It's a really, really bad sign for me. I have an internal Elgato something one another 4K gibberish potato sandwich. I don't remember the name of the card. $4K 60 Pro, whichever one is like the 4K one. This is around when I'm fighting the itis, and the itis tried to kick my ass. You know it. You already know. You know it is. Yeah, if you want to take a nap, by all means, you do that, honey. Cool, I messed that up. Fact, office user form. Yeah, I watched the state of play. You can actually see me, my VOD from it on YouTube. Exclamation mark YouTube. See what I did there? That's called a free plug. Quick impressions. I don't give a shit about most of the games. But I mean, that's literally how I am about most things. I cared about literally the last 3 games. And Naruto, surprisingly. But I'm so all right. Let me be very frank with you and very, very honest. There's a reason why I don't really put up reactions to whole press things like this anymore. What up, Nikki? Why is everybody coming in and saying well and well damn? And it's all the ladies around me. But essentially, when it comes to a good chunk of the games, Jesus, that come out, I am very underwhelmed with a lot of games. I just don't play a lot. Like, Suicide Squad looks fun, but it's only going to be fun. Come the king of the ring, the head of the table. I don't sleep. AKA SJ. Oh my God. Someone get this woman. Someone get. I'm getting the hose again. I'm getting the hose. I hear her posting stuff about being a leader and shit. Ooh, link me that. Or show it to me. Because I'm probably going to give you a call as soon as I finish streaming. To be honest with you. Because I got free time, you know. And I forgot it was SmackDown night. And I want to watch the new episode of Abbott because I heard it was good. So I'm like, ooh, yeah. Whew. I'm trying to put the bloodline thing. Oh boy. It's heating up. It's heating up. Yeah, I understand this trend of live service games and all that. Yeah, I was okay. So I was excited for Suicide Squad until they started talking about it, and I feel like that's the thing that actually ended up making me more and more upset. I felt like Suicide Squad was going to be really fun, and I still think it's going to be a fun game, but they're killing that game, man. Really? So they weren't traveling with him, but they were traveling together. I mean, they usually only travel together. But I don't know what to make of that. You know? I don't know what to make of that. At least not yet. At least not yet. SmackDown might be pretty good tonight. Well, okay. It might be very okay tonight. Because at least we get more of what's going on. Yeah, yeah. If it's Sami and Owens, I'm going to be pissed. Alex, we don't need that. We really don't. And I was reading somewhere that they're trying to figure out what to do because the crowd's response to Sami is actually a lot different than people had thought. They're not freaking out, but they're definitely going like, oh, damn.
Arrives at the temple. This place that holds so
That's great. I don't need to feel this is a weird story thing, and I'm just kind of doing it to press some buttons to pass some time, you know? But back to the state of play thing. Yeah, I just don't care about a lot of games. This was a new quote he used. Embrace your position, embracing it, don't shy away from it. You're a leader, people follow you. Ooh. Yeah, screenshot it and send it to me. Well, people are calling it the same as Daniel Bryan for Sami. Whether a creative listener or not, it's up to them. Just be better surprised if fans get pissed at the company for the mistake. Exactly. Right now, Sami is white hot the same way Daniel Bryan was. And people want the change, and they gave the change to Daniel Bryan. And you know what happened? It worked out pretty well. The problem is that Daniel Bryan got hurt. He got hurt as soon as it like started. So unfortunately, it didn't go the way that they probably would have wanted. Okay, let me look at these real quick. Let's look at them. Let's look at them. Cortez. Whoo! They going super blood though. That's the thing. They going super blood, you know. I like it. I like it. I can't wait. Right. It's what I tell ya. Ooh. Man said here, you gonna stay here, yeah. Oh, good combo breaker. Computer, please stop running. It's gonna be good. Like I'm interested to see what the Usos is gonna do. Like they're the most interesting part of SmackDown. The Bloodline storyline is actually keeping me interested and wanting to watch SmackDown week after week after week after week, right? Because frankly, everything else is kind of okay. It's not bad. Like I'm interested in everything that happens with like Bianca and Asuka in Raw, right? I'm interested to see Rhea talk about Charlotte just because I want Charlotte to lose. At this point, I don't care about anything else than having Charlotte lose. But otherwise, I don't know. Wrestling's hitting that point for me where it's like, oh, I could probably wait till like Mania or something and probably be happy. It's hitting that level, and I don't want it to hit that level. I really don't. I prefer it not to. Because I enjoy wrestling. I love it. Hell, I'm getting a lot more enjoyment playing older retro games at the moment. But I'm interested. It's got me hooked. It's got me at least hooked. I'll say that much. Okay. Oh, Edmund. I wouldn't, the way I want to hurt you for that. Algor, oh my god. I'm about to pop the oh my god. He out here teasing shit when we talked about him not saying no. Okay. This is run these by me first. I can't even. Okay, I'm gonna check it in just a moment.
Run from fate. But you should have tried.
Supreme victory!
Oh, wow. Yeah, I was sitting here like, huh. They flowed together. Holy shit. Like, Corey out asleep as I say, yeah, I'm gonna leave it alone. I did watch them all while they were asleep. I watched them all together because when you sent me the one thing, it showed them all together. And also, you're too much. You know, I love that he's using his social media to his advantage and use it as another story tool or another method to continue the story. The video ended we always said this mother move. Yeah, I was about to say, I was like, damn. No. Whew. No, homie, has no thing to say. Okay.
But you should have tried.
I'm gonna get the hose again. I'm gonna get the hose. Gonna have to put you in that cage. Put you in that cage. He's off. Okay. I think I'm done with this fucking mode. Where Garurumon? Look, Saberwolf. Saberwolf's an OG, man. This Papa John's commercial has me screaming every time I watch. The weird one with the Usos fucking going over. Yeah. Yeah, I saw them on my roster. To be honest with you, Ox, I kind of don't care. Like, I like WCW, but I was not a WCW watcher. So a lot of the WCW stuff, it's cool. Like, I'm interested in trying it, obviously, because I like play Revenge. Revenge has a... But it's like, it's weird. Like, I saw like a weird thing of it, and I'm like, yeah, WCW seems fine. But I wasn't watching WCW. All of my WCW stuff comes from, what you call it? Like, stuff on the network, going to a WCW show in the worst time frame of WCW, and Revenge. Like, I didn't watch it. My friends watched it. I watched WWF. Well, it's theirs. I did look at it, Ox, when you first sent it. Okay, no, I didn't look at the roster. I looked at the unlockables. Yeah, why would anybody? I don't even know some of these people. I think that's the worst part is I actually don't know some of these people. Yeah, on first glance, I don't know some of these people. I probably know the name, but nothing by like image wise. Jarrett. I only know that's Rick Rude, and I know that's Farouk, but it's not called Farouk. It was something else. Like, I don't know who the fuck these NWO people are. Fam, I'm so out of the loop for that. Yeah. New Japan? I'm going to assume that there was like some sort of new thing. John should have closed the box on John every time. It has me screaming every single time. Jesus. How many times have you watched this commercial? Don't answer that question. Don't answer that question. Cottage Country? I don't even know what that is. What the hell is Casino Rama in Cottage Country? I need to cut my fucking nail. It's not even that long. It's just long enough. My man, is it? I gotta support. Oh my god. Caught my ass. Finish it. Lexington Cottage in at least one casino, apparently. All right. God damn it. Whew. Yeah, Lyris was locked in this mod. I think it's interesting that they make it so that you get to play a bunch of people and then you have to unlock them, so it's like incentivizing you to continually play the mod. But I was just having issues trying to use the mod, period. Like every time I was trying to use like Showdown 64, which is a good mod, its main issue that I kept having was just trying to get it set up. So I just gave up. Whew, okay. They gave Solo a 82. I guess it's not bad. I guess him being an 82 isn't too bad. Just because, I mean, he hasn't really wrestled, so you have they don't really have anything to base off of it, except for the stuff he's done in NXT for 2022. And yeah, I mean, it's not bad. Beth Phoenix being an 87 is justifiable, I guess. I hate to say it, Natty being an 82 seems a little crazy to me. And that doesn't have any disrespect towards Natalya. Oh my god. That was heavy. Why am I doing this? Okay. Come on, fam. Okay, I got no. All right, all right. What up, boss? Oh my god, fucking Aganos. Oh my god. Yeah. Whew. Bet. Fuck, man. You know why I don't like playing Saberwolf? Because if my nails aren't perfectly, like, super low, then they're gonna, like, scratch my hand as I'm trying to do this. And it fucking sucks. Like, it's the weirdest thing. And it's only Saberwolf where I feel like this. Where I'm playing it and I'm like, I'm scratching myself because of my damn nails. And my nails aren't even that long. Like, people would look at my nails and be like, oh, they're pretty short. I'd be like, yeah, they really are. I was about to say, how many more of these characters do I gotta fight in the story mode? I'm on the last one. Yo, Rochi Souls, thank you for the follow. I appreciate it. Goddamn. And the worst part is now I have to wait. There it is. Ah, damn. Fucked it up.
Supreme victory.
Oh, well. Oh, that face. That long face looks really hilarious to me. These are books. Yes. Knowledge. And these are books. An average combo damage of 40 in one match. So I have to literally play very aggressive in a way. It may not be this match. I pressed the button because I wasn't expecting him to do it again. Watch the average combo damage in this match be like 38. Something really ridiculous. Oh, it's 41. Never mind. All right, we're good. It really sucks because I did all this stuff on Xbox and now I got to do it again on PC, and it's like, that's great. It's great. Like my Orchid on PC is max level. Yeah, it wasn't too bad. A little ultra combo, 89. It wasn't too bad. Probably could have got a little bit higher if I did the flick flack kicks or whatever they're called. Then go from there. So, yeah. I think I've heard of it whenever I tried it. Showdown 64 is like incredibly big. Oh, it's the thing is the people that make it apparently don't support it anymore. But yeah, it's very big. I dashed into it. God damn. Fucking Hisako. This character is crazy. She always has been, but she's cool as fuck. God damn it. Can I please get my goddamn instinct to come out? Jesus, man. Certain computer characters just be like, we gonna make sure you have a difficult ass time beating us. And I'd be like, yo, you crazy. But I
You'll make a fine specimen.
Whew. Okay. Oh. Okay.
One step closer to flushing out Ultra.
Oh, he jumped over my cat. Yo, that was sick. I hate Combo. There's a couple characters that I have trouble fighting, and Combo is one of them. Just because I never know, like, his punches or whatever it is. I never know which ones are it.
son. Where'd you find this?
Whew. Damn, son. I like that. I like that sound command for some reason. I forget I had it, and then it's just funny to hear. I was beating the shit out of that computer. Like, they had no chance to do anything. Yeah, instinct mode is like V-trigger, right? So it's really good if you see somebody do some shit where it's like, oh shit, they're jumping in. I can activate instinct and then DP from it. So it's scumbaggy in that way. And you want to remember to have it because you want to use it on your green bar so that you can get it on the red bar. Or if you can't use it on the green bar, then you have to remember to use it on the red bar immediately. Alright, I think I did everybody else on her. Okay. 100% breaker percent in a single match. Let's see if I actually remember how to play Chief Thunder at all. I can tell you I'm not going to be doing any of the breaker challenges against Omen. I don't fight this character enough. As you can see, he is just laying waste to me. Come on. I can't even get an attack in, bro. I do not play Thunder. First match, immediately lost to Omen. Because I don't play Thunder. God damn. That was a heavy. You piece of shit. God, screw Omen. And I still need to get 100%, bro. I need to fight a character I know how to fight. Saberwolf? That's much easier to deal with. God, D-Zam. What up, Derek? Ah, cuts yo-yo. My fucking breaker ratio is 25%. Oh my god. Always good to hear Ox. Woo!
I'm sorry. I've just never been so inspired.
I hate this character. I do not play this fucker. And I am getting fucking obliterated by Conra. No. Thought I was blocking. No. Come on. Once again, thought I was blocking. He's so floaty. Fuck. God, I do not like this character, man. I never have liked Thunder. I am not a Thunder character, man. I am not a Thunder player. I'm sorry. God damn it, no. I hate this fucking character so much, bro. Like, I am not having fun. I do not like Thunder. Don't care. Get it out of here. Get him the fuck out of here. Jesus, man. Stinking alien. Whew. All right. That didn't feel too bad. Wow. They give my breaker ratio 50% because I only did 2 breakers. What a dumb reason. What a dumb logic. They want you to do a minimum of 4. Which means you have to literally act upon them to do something. That you know that you can break. Usually I expect them to do the laser, but I can't expect them to do laser because this is a computer. Now this computer turned the fuck up. Wow. Wow. Yeah, whatever. I didn't get the challenge done, but oh well. I'm not gonna worry about that, because I was not pleased with that. But I don't play Thunder. I don't. So yeah, cool. The one that I knew I was gonna have the toughest time, I didn't get. That's a pain in the ass. Oh, and I gotta do these as well. Oh, damn. So you have your normal Arbiter outfit, and then you have the retro one, which gives him the Fallen skin or whatever they called it. I don't remember. But you get to put him in like different helmets, the Elite Commander helmet. So that's cool. So like for me, it's like I would like him to be in this, and then of course you can change everything. You can change the color, so. But you can just change the normal color. He's got some good colors here and there. Like the white and red one's really good. His colors are kind of meh, to be honest with you. They're very okay. But his retro outfit has a little bit better. Just because you can give him the full elite look. So that's cool. But yeah, he's not bad. He has some cool stuff here and there. Well, the Arbiter wasn't in Reach, but I know what you mean. I think they just grabbed stuff from Reach. But yeah, Rash has like his modern stuff too. And then he's got the retro one, which gives him a little more color. What's funny is that Rash doesn't have like a whole lot of like nods to anything, which kind of sucks. Because I was hoping he'd have like gimmicks to like rare properties or something like that. Maybe in his retro stuff, I think. I don't remember. Yeah. He has like a Conqueror thing. He has an afro. He has the banjo backpack. Or a rareware backpack, because this is not banjo. This is a banjo scarf. But it's the thing from Banjo Nuts and Bolts. But he has shorts. So yeah, this is like my favorite stuff. He also has like a rareware hoodie. Sure, why not? Jesus Christ. Oh, cool. Boss isn't showing online, so it makes it really hard. Yeah, there was a patch. I don't know for what, but it was a patch. Let's go to sleep in Paris. Wake up in Tokyo. Fall asleep in New Orleans and land in Chicago. We can land in the motherlands. I don't know why that song just popped in my head. Wherever I go, she goes. I hated that song, fam. I like Paris and Tokyo. I need some energy. Random question, boss. Did you know there's a One Piece card game? And that goes to any other weeb in the chat. I was watching a video earlier, and I don't know if it's only in Japan at the moment, but I was just like, there's a whole ass One Piece card game, like a trading card game, and I was like, oh shit. So now I have a new thing to look into. Apparently, the One Piece card game just released in English. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Now I'm curious. I'm curious. I'm just curious how it works. Like that's the one thing about like I went to GameStop to pick up this. It's not a board game, but it's like it's a little card game. Whatever. Me and the buddies can get to play. It's called Rock Paper Wizard. Cool. This is like mirrored, so this is not gonna like look normal. Hold on. Yeah, I forgot that this is mirrored. Yeah, so it's called Rock Paper Wizard. It's really simple. It was $10, and I'm like, yeah, you know, I'm down to try it. Whatever. And I was looking at Pokemon cards just because I was like, man, I've been having an itch for a TCG, and I don't want to reinvest into Magic. What's funny is I thought Pokemon was expensive, and Magic is somehow even more expensive, and I don't want to do Yu-Gi-Oh. Yu-Gi-Oh is too crazy for me to want to do. Pokemon is like section off in the blocks, kind of like how Magic is, and it's not that bad, and I can play it online. And I was like semi-curious because I was like, damn, I kind of want to play it, but seeing this One Piece game got me like intrigued because I'm like, damn, they got a One Piece card game. I wonder how good or bad it is, you know? The problem is because it's a starting card game, it isn't like I can just start it and go from there. Nah, it's like it starts and good luck. You got to find people to play with. Also, I need to send this to Momo. I don't know if this is on anything other than PS4 for this price. But I remember me and Momo were talking about this. But Pocky and Rocky Reshrine for PS4 is $23.48 on Amazon. And they have none on Switch at the moment. But man, this motherfucker. Right, give me 30 seconds. I'm like, fam. And it better just be an exhibition. And he went to lobby. God damn it. I knew this was going to happen. I had to do a performance test. Yeah, I know. I know how it works. I know how it works, motherfucker. No. Look at this old level 2 head ass.
I have faced the flood and silenced truth. I will quell your thunder and douse your flames.
Slide. Slide. All right. I sent this man in for you. Oh boy. I mean, but you left the lobby too. Oh, yeah, because if you go to exhibition, we don't have to keep like going back to the lobby. That's the reason why I wanted to do it. I mean, I sent you an invite. Let me restart the game. What? Okay. I will say, for as good as the netcode is, the infrastructure around it is old and janky. That's the reason why it's so like awkward. It's because this shit just doesn't work half the time. Excuse me. Yeah, it's just a janky ass netcode.
Watch out. You might get cut.
Oh, and I forgot to mute you. Well, oh well. Fuck.
You're not worthy prey.
Supreme victory!
Ah, damn. Oh, okay. All right.
You're not worthy prey.
I'll get the last coochie bag if I had to. Oh my god. That wasn't heavy? I thought that was. Oh, that was not. I was wrong on that. Nice. Whew.
You're not worthy prey.
Yeah, you just gotta remember the timing for combo structures. Really, that's all it is. Oh god, that was the wrong one. Ah, that was supposed to be a super. Whew. It did a lot of damage.
You're not worthy prey.
You either want to eat or you don't. Whew.
You're not worthy prey.
Yeah, fuck Biotic. Yeah, right at the end, it was like, here, you're gonna have to fucking guess for your life. And it fucking flipped you around. I was like, oh, cool, bet. I'll take those. I'll take those. Oh, they didn't connect. Oi, 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 oi.
You're not worthy prey.
No.
You're not worthy prey. That's a gold shed of bones. I do not remember how to play this character. I just realized that the moment I picked her. I have no idea how to switch between her bodies. Good shit. There goes the one body. Oh, cool. Damn. Damn. Whew, my Arya's cheeks. That's really unfortunate. Find another body. Nah, she only got 3. Ah. What the fuck are her moves? I've been throwing out in the fireball body. I'm like, yo, what are the moves? Oh, I can't do anything. That's right. The teleport? No, no. Oh, goddamn. Damn. Ah, goddamn. Ah, shit. I noticed my health at the last second, and I was like, oh god, I need to jump. Woo! Ah, that was heavy. So I don't know why I thought differently. Oh, no, that's a bad idea. Whew! I think I'm gonna do one more and then I'm gonna get off. Whew. Oh, that's awesome. Ah, damn. I didn't realize which body I was in. I thought I was in the projectile one. Whew. Okay. Whew. I feel like your spinal is much better than your cinder. I'm tired laughing. Okay, I'm in my stream because I'm a little hungry and I kind of want to run out and grab something real quick before I even sit and chill for the rest of the day until tonight. But yeah. Thanks, boss, for the games. We'll play more for sure. Tonight was supposed to be KI night, but we did a pit. We're doing a hard fucking pivot. And we're going to do some Tekken, some Street Fighter, and some Mortal Kombat to talk about Street Fighter 6, Tekken 8, and MK12. So get prepared for that. Nami, thank you for the shout out to boss. I hope you got that nap from that itis. I hope you did. And see, this is why she's queen of the stream. She knows what to do. And of course, check me out on YouTube. If you're in chat, obviously go ahead. I ain't even sleep. Well, then never mind. See, didn't even get to sleep. Yeah, she probably wasn't gonna sleep. It's fine. But it's like you be wanting to sleep, but you're like, I ain't sleeping. I already know. But yeah, if you're not, this I've been going back and forth. You've been slapboxing the itis the entire time. That's the problem. Pat, 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 pat. But yeah, if you're watching the stream right now and you miss any VODs from the past, they're all up on YouTube. I put up clips and stuff there, and I'm putting up original videos moving forward as well. So it's going to be a lot more as time proceeds and whatnot. But I appreciate all the love and support. I love every one of y'all. I'll be back tomorrow. Go ahead. What's up? Ba-da. Yes, I will take you to the farmer's ball. I have no idea what I'm talking about. Damn, that hair. Cheerios with sugar or ramen? Damn, I ain't had no plain Cheerios. Ooh, I ain't had no Cheerios in a long, long time. This one piece of hair. Motherfucker. I'm gonna have to fix that. Put ramen in your Cheerios. Ew. Cheerios. Excuse me. I'm going with the Cheerios. Oh, God, I sneezed. My nipples got stiff. What kind of human are you? Oh, God damn. My man nipples are stiff from that sneeze. Oh, God. It was such a strong sneeze. I mean, he's telling you don't put ramen in the Cheerios, so So Rob, oh, okay, all right, sure, okay, 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 it's okay. That's all right. Cool. But yeah, we're gonna go, and you guys have a great day. I'm gonna talk to you later. Nami, I'll probably call you in a minute. Let's see what's up. Oh my goodness! Wait. I have waited.
I'm sorry. I've just never been so inspired.
I don't know why I expected something different or something more poignant. Oh my god.
I'm sorry. I've just never been so inspired.
Okay, I'm gonna go.
I'm sorry.
Not
I've
at all
just never been so
laughing.
inspired.
What a good idea I thought to throw some sounds in and some little videos, for the channel point. Why do you?
I'm sorry. I've just never
Why?
been so inspired.
Okay, I'm leaving. Have a good one, y'all. I'll catch y'all tomorrow. I love you. Bye.